Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to August, and welcome to This Week in Mormons, the premier Latter-day Saint news and entertainment podcast. I'm Jeff Openshaw.
And I'm Tiffany Hales, one half of the Twin Sisters.
That's right. We're combining forces this week because sometimes it's just a fun thing to do, folks. So glad you're here listening with us. Apologies, the show's getting out a little bit late this week. We just had some things we had to tie off that made it difficult to record on our usual Monday time. And if Tiffany doesn't mind that those complications were the fact that Tiffany had no carpet or furniture. So that was the main issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if I've talked about it with Ariane when we've podcasted that I began a remodel of my house in April. And this is kind of the end accumulation of that remodel is to get the carpet. And the carpet, the first day of carpet installation was today. So last night we were moving furniture, getting things ready, painting trim after we'd pulled up carpet to get ready for round one of carpet. And it looks amazing. It's like I'm living in a brand new house. It is so nice because when we moved into this house 11 years ago, we had 6 kids at home. And now I'm down to 1. And I have to tell you, those 6 kids did a number on my house. You know,
Oh, yeah.
we'd fix things that we needed to. But other than that, my husband and I would just shake our heads and go, we'll have nice things someday. Someday when we have no children, we'll have nice things.
We're
And we're
still
to
on
that
like a lot
point.
of we're still on a lot of the whatever furniture we got as
Yeah.
newlyweds all these years later because now we're like they're just going to destroy anything we buy, so just destroy the stuff. It's fine.
Exactly.
It's fine.
Exactly. Well, and when I moved in, when we bought this house, there was a retired couple that lived here, and they had put cream color carpet throughout the house. And I'm taking a look at that cream color carpet, and I'm like, oh man, my kids are gonna do a number on this. And let me tell you, they did not disappoint. And so now I have gone to a lovely milk chocolate brown carpet to hide
Interesting.
all dirt.
I'm a big fan of grays. I like gray carpet. Big fan of the gray. Just love the gray. We have gray carpet. Very happy. Well, oh, Tiffany doesn't like this. It's a classy gray. I have very classy carpet. It's very classy.
I think gray is on the way out, Jeff. I think everybody's tired of gray everything.
How
And
dare you? Well,
I
yeah.
think that earth tones are going to be coming back in. I think we're going to see the resurgence of brown.
They might be doing that, but one thing we're in different places. You're pretty much in the home you want to be in for
True.
forever, right? We have no
Yes.
plan of this is not our long-term house. We will move on at some point. And so even little things we do, we always do it with the thought of how much easier is this to have a blank palette for resale later on. Like
Hmm.
we bought the house, I was telling you, one bedroom was bright pink and the other bedroom was blue with like Spider-Man painted all over the ceiling. It was a mother of a time to just get all this stuff painted over and be all nice
Yeah.
and neutral. Um, and for that reason, like, yeah, I mean, right now, if we were selling, who cares? This is still
Yeah.
a good seller's market. But we try to keep things reasonable here. With the reasonable open shots, it's what my wife and I are. We just kind of try to be reasonable folks across the board.
I completely agree. We had a Tuscan theme going on in my house because it was last remodeled in about 2006, 2007.
You have
Very
archways, beautiful
Oh,
archways.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
archways,
columns.
yellows, the whole
Mm.
9 yards, and so, I could not change my travertine tile, I could not change my granite, and I could not change my cabinets, so I went to a friend of mine who's a designer, and I said, "These are the things I cannot change, give me a paint color that will work with all of those," and she gave me, it's called, Swiss coffee, which would make you think that it is brown, but it is actually a creamy white. So we went with a very neutral palette for all of our walls, and we are going to choose our color via accessories.
That's what you're supposed to do. That's the way forward.
Exactly.
Well, good for you. This has been an
So,
insightful discussion about these things. My goal is to somehow make subway tile work for flooring, but it's yet to
oh,
be done. I'm kidding. Can
yeah,
you
good
imagine?
good luck with that.
A
No, don't
complete
do it
mess.
because there's way too much grout, because that's the other thing I've had to do is we've got these lovely 12 by 12 travertine tiles, and the grout looked like it was chocolate grout. It was never chocolate grout. It was linen grout, but I had to get down there and scrub all the grout out, and now it looks like how it's supposed to look.
Oh man, manual labor is hard. No fun.
It
Don't they
really
know you're a
is.
lawyer? You're a fancy litigator. You don't have time for this. You're supposed to hire someone. Oh well.
My husband won't let me. He's like, "We can do this ourselves." And he's not wrong.
No, I mean, I feel it. Well, I'm glad things in Idaho are going swimmingly, and likewise Virginia. We're Virginiaing on out here in Virginia in the D.C. area, living the dream. And it's an interesting week for Latter-day Saint news, ladies and gentlemen. It's a fun random week. I love fun random weeks when there really isn't
Yeah,
like a big theme. Last week we spoke a lot about the Joseph Smith photo, for example, or the
yeah.
one allegedly about Joseph Smith. That's a huge story, and it's still ongoing. There
Oh,
are
yeah.
updates. Are some I've seen. I've already seen the gamut of people who are trying to prove it one way or the other. So good times there. This week, on the other hand, just to give you a teaser, we have things like female chaplains, singles wards, some Mormons behaving badly, with vandalism or bad sheriffs, yes, things like that. It was Pioneer Day and fires in temples. It's that kind of a week, folks. Just fires in temples. You know what? I might as well talk about the fire in temple because here I am. This is a weird story because we don't see things like this very often. But about a week ago, it's kind of right after we published last week's episode, so it was not included. There was a fire at the Orem Utah Temple. And if you remember, the Orem Utah Temple is not a functional temple. The Orem Utah Temple is under construction right now. It's probably, I don't know, 2/3 of the way done or so, based on the look of
Yeah.
it.
When you look at the picture, it looks, I mean, they've done some significant work on it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's cruising along. They still have scaffolding around the
Yeah.
exterior paneling and all that, but so it's not lit or sealed or anything like that. But they are still investigating flames that were reported on Monday, July 25th, just before midnight, inside the temple. They said the fire was quickly extinguished. The source of the fire is not yet known. They used foam to extinguish the fire, which limited water damage to the construction site. And they're still investigating what the hooey happened in this case. And it's been a week and we checked, and I have not seen an update as far as what happened here, which makes me believe it was not vandalism. If it was vandalism, we would immediately say it
Yeah.
was vandalism. I have to assume this might have been like contractor error in some regard, and so the information is going to be a little bit slower in that sense. I mean, remember when the Provo
Yeah.
Tabernacle caught a blaze? I forgot what was the reason for that. Wasn't it's like a
It was
oh,
an
it was
electrical fire.
yes, it was something that started. But what was the? I know it was electrical, but what started? It was electrical, wasn't it? Someone left a lantern or
Yeah,
something
somebody
nearby. No,
left something on, and I don't recall, but I just know that it was electrical.
I'm trying to remember what it was. Let's see. Fire, cultural impact. Fire. What do we have here? 12 weeks for now. It's a mixed heat source, specifically an energized 300-watt lamp, which was placed too close to combustible materials,
Ah,
specifically a wooden speaker enclosure. That's the same rationale why you're not usually allowed to put power outlets inside closets, ladies and gentlemen. Look that up. It's probably against code wherever you live.
really? I had no idea. I have a closet that has a power outlet in it.
It's not always. The idea is the risk that people throw boxes and stuff in
Ah,
closets, and you could put something flammable near an outlet and not think much about it, whereas you wouldn't do that in most other rooms in your house. So anyway, this has happened in Orem. Everything's fine. Obviously, this was not
yeah,
an active temple or anything like that. But you don't see these stories very often, and I'm curious to see if they ever tell us what actually happened, or if it will forever
exactly.
be a mystery, like what happened to the Harrison New York temple. Who knows?
I'm going to guess that it was probably construction related, that a worker was doing something and forgot to turn something off. And
Like a
that's,
blowtorch. Yeah.
who knows?
Welder. All that
You know,
welding inside the temple.
the stake center that I went to growing up, this was in the 90s. They were putting a new roof on it in July. And the construction workers, the roofers, I don't know what they did, but they started the roof of the building on fire. And then it
Oh,
just
good.
went up like a matchstick.
Wow.
It was very sad because it was a really cool building. It was built in the 40s, so it had kind of a lot of art deco stuff going on with it. And of course, they replaced it with just your regular cookie cutter basic church, which kind of bummed me out because it was just architectural wise very unique. So, yeah, I that's probably the cause is something construction related.
Yeah, I choose to believe it was vandalism. Come on. Somebody crept into like the second floor somehow, and it was hobos.
It was hobos.
It was a trash can fire. They didn't want to tell us. There were squatters inside.
Squatters in
That's
the
all.
temple. Yep. I'm sure
Squatters
that's
in the
it.
temple. Squatters in the Temple. Name of the episode, done right there.
There you go. All right. Where do you want to go next, Jeff?
This is up to you, Tiffany. Come on, you're an equal player here. Whatever you want to
Well,
do.
shall we do the story about the church endorses its first female military chaplain?
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Go for it.
I thought it was very interesting. So, there is a young woman. Her name is Jenna Carson. She is a returned missionary and she's graduated from BYU and Harvard Divinity School. And what was interesting is kind of her path as to how she got to be a chaplain. So she'd served a mission, and while she was on her mission, I think she said that she just had some she was trying to figure out essentially what she wanted to be when she grew up. And so she came back from her mission and she went back to BYU. And during the time she was on her mission, she got a revelation that she was going to go to graduate school after she finished her bachelor's degree. So she was talking with one of her professors, and her professor said, "Hey, have you thought about Harvard Divinity School?" So she was like, "No, I haven't." And so she made some choices that landed her at Harvard Divinity School. And she ultimately comes from a family that had served in the military. None of them had been chaplains, but they had had military service, and she never really envisioned herself being in the military. But she just kind of felt this calling that she needed to perhaps be a military chaplain. And so there is a whole process apparently that you have to go through to apply to be a military chaplain.
Like
And
with the church. Yeah,
with the
it's like with the
church.
church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so why don't you explain that process, Jeff?
Oh,
Because
I don't
maybe
know what the
you understand.
process
I
is.
don't know. Yeah, it just said
It's a process. It's a process.
yeah. So it's a process. She had a bunch of paperwork she had to, um, because she has to get endorsed by the church. So the church has to say, yes, we endorse her to be a chaplain. And it says her endorsement process stretched out over several years. She had several setbacks. Not everybody was encouraging. She also dealt with a personal challenge during that time. She ended up divorced, but she just remained certain that that's where the Lord wanted her to do to, what to for her what that's
Yeah.
what the Lord wanted for her. And
So
go ahead.
whenever you're ready, I looked up some of the requirements in the process for
Okay,
the
what
chapter.
are the requirements?
I didn't mean to jump in there. So it's fascinating when they do this because we have military liaisons in the church, and there's a whole wing that does things like this. So the first step is you contact the military relations and chaplain division by email or by phone, and then you go through and just the initial endorsement requirements. You submit an application. You possess a current temple recommend. You complete interviews with the bishop and stake president, but it doesn't stop there. These interviews, of course, are coordinated by the military relations and chaplain division. You complete a chaplain advisory board review. You complete a psychological personality evaluation. You complete a general authority interview.
Mm.
You have to serve faithful in church callings. Um, and they said it's preferred but not mandatory that chaplains have served full-time missions, which is also
Okay.
interesting as well. Um, and they, of course, they have a working knowledge of the handbook, specialized educational, training requirements, which in this case is often a graduate degree in theology is very, very common. Um, and that's what you have to get up front. Then you have to do a bunch of annual endorsement requirements and continue with that stuff and get recertified. It's a pretty rigorous process, you would think. And I feel like you don't hear much about military chaplains, and we have this entire apparatus in place
Which
to go
I
through a lot of steps to get there. Yeah.
I had no idea. So it actually functions, once she's approved, essentially kind of as a calling, and she is set apart by a general authority. It's crazy. I
Yeah.
think I think she said she was set apart by Elder Jaggy. I think that's how
That's
his
not a real person.
well. I could very well be mispronouncing it. I'm not known for my pronunciation of people's names. Anyway, I also thought it was very interesting because I would have assumed if you had asked me prior to this story that the church would limit being a chaplain to male members. And I just would have assumed that. I would have assumed they wouldn't have considered a sister for a
Yeah.
chaplain, and but apparently that's not a requirement.
I know, and I guess it's just kind of on us for assuming in that
Yeah,
sense, right?
exactly.
But it does make sense. It fits the mold. We're so accustomed to we view a chaplain as like, okay, some form of spiritual leader.
Exactly.
And they can vary as far as your duties, but that's a lot of what you're doing. And so it's, I think given how we are as Latter-day Saints organizationally, we would assume that's a man. But it's also not priesthood focused per se. And we know that women are using the priesthood, through delegation and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're not doing anything that requires ordination
Mm-mm.
or ordinances or anything like that that you would have to have the priesthood to in which to officiate.
Exactly. Just basically ministering and counseling.
So here's something that's interesting. I'm looking at another one of their web pages. It does say church requirements are that Latter-day Saint applicants applying to serve as military chaplain must be married in the temple and remain worthy. And she mentions in hers that she's divorced. And as far as I know, did she remarry? Does it say that anywhere in the
It
article?
doesn't say in the article that she remarried. It just said that during the process that she had a personal challenge of divorce. So
Yeah. And it's
I
interesting. So I mean the oh sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, she was presumably married in the temple. It just says married in the temple and remained, what was it, worthy?
Yeah.
So, and who knows what the cause of the divorce was?
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
that's
it
fine. That's fine.
it
So
could very well be something that was not within her control.
yeah, so it is interesting. So that we understand the responsibilities of military chaplains and what they are, because they're not branch presidents or anything like that. So you're a member of commander's staff. Chaplains serve as moral, ethical, and spiritual advisors to their commanders. They ensure that individuals are afforded religious freedom while they're serving, of course. A lot of their work is done one on one, but they advise commanders regarding the impact of religion on military operations. They minister aboard wherever they are, if it's the Navy, like, Navy and Coast Guard ships at sea during combat operations. They teach classes to service members on topics, though, of religions, ethics, leadership. It's a very interesting role. It
Yeah,
covers a lot of bases, and the main thing is you have to be able to operate in a religiously pluralistic environment. You might be
yeah.
giving counsel to someone who's not of your faith; they're not necessarily strictly devoted to Latter-day Saints to be a chaplain. So it's cool stuff. I can't believe we haven't had a female one to this point, but I think it's great. Blazing trails.
I think it's awesome. Go, Jenna.
If I can add a quick thing, because we're talking about gender stuff here. Last week, Jared and I spoke extensively about why women can't pass the sacrament, and we don't have to get into a lot of detail this week. But I just want to thank one of our listeners for passing my way an interesting piece from the Journal of Mormon History that gave an overview of essentially the devolution of Aaronic priesthood responsibilities from
Oh,
men to teenage boys over the decades of the church's existed and how this process went, because they haven't for a long time. Aaronic priesthood was also an adult thing, and then they slowly got the young men involved. There was even a lot of reticence in some areas to allow young men to pass the sacrament because they thought they wouldn't take it like seriously enough or with enough reverence because they were teenagers and were not to be trusted, or things like that.
they're still
um,
not to be trusted.
so shout out for that, for getting it my way, and a very, very interesting piece in that article. And it does stand to reason. Like, you look at it and say, okay, like, it's a good reminder. There's not there's policy, and there's things that we do because the leaders have said it's what we do. But the young men, deacons passing the sacrament is not laid out in the scriptures. It's a decision that we've made that evolved over time for them to do that. And I can fully understand someone who makes the argument that young women should have every reason to also be
Yeah,
able to pass the sacrament. They can't bless it. That's administering the sacrament. But to pass it around, you can see the arguments. To be clear, I'm not agitating. If anyone in Salt Lake is listening, I'm not pushing for anything. I'm not marching on Salt Lake. I'm not trying to do anything out of untoward towards any of our leaders. I'm just noting something here for everyone's listening. So thank you, listeners, for keeping me on the straight and narrow. In that case, okay, okay. I don't think I'm going to get excommunicated. I
take a
think
deep breath, Jeff.
All right. So, new one here. Article over at the Exponent de this past week called basically says singles words are against my religion. Um, yeah, okay, that's a fun way to put it. But it brings back to the fore one of my favorite topics: singles wards, and essentially, should they or should they not exist? This is from author Trudy. Talks about her own experiences refusing to go to a singles ward even as she entered her 30s, and how she always felt that the singles in the church were sort of less than when it came to the members, that we treat them as a segregated class to essentially
Second
say
class citizens.
yeah. Essentially saying the real wards are the family wards, and the singles wards are a place we have shunted these second class citizens until they get it together and rejoin the real church. I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Till they get it together and get themselves married so they can rejoin the real
That's what
church.
I mean. Yes, yes, yes. It's not just like a sanatorium. Yes. Um, so where they get married, and she provides 6 reasons why singles wards are against her religion, as she says. I think there's some compelling arguments here. I don't agree with everything that's listed, but I like number one. She says singles wards show the youth of the church that there's no place for them if they don't marry. I think it's a bit of a broad generalization, but I get it because teenagers at church observe adults to see what the church will be like. And with the popularity of singles wards, what they see is that single people are sent away from the congregation and permitted to return when they have done that respectable thing and gotten married, or if you hit 31 and get booted out. And as she says, return in disgrace. Um, like I get it. It might benefit youth to say, "Oh yeah, there's like regular single people in my ward." Like where instead of always assuming where do they disappear to? Where do they go? They just disappear and live this different life. And like we said, singles wards
Yeah.
perpetuate the notion of single people as other. I think that's I get it. I think that's fine. Singles wards deprive single members of opportunities to experience a diverse congregation. I agree with that one quite a bit because you're roughly the same age. You might be from different walks of life, but you're all kind of there doing the same
Yeah.
thing in the same scene, and you're not experiencing the church like as it is for everybody else, and with the real life that comes from that. And likewise, singles wards deprive the rest of the church of the talents of single people, and I do agree with this one quite a bit because I've seen the good and the bad of this. Yes, I think singles wards kind of get pushed away, and because all you're thinking is like, well, these kids married, we also want to keep them active, so we give them this special organization and structure to keep them involved in the church and be with their peers, and with the hope they'll also be cool. Like on the DC side, I've seen part of the downside of it is the singles wards in DC are very large and a lot of fun, and I honestly think it delays marriage for some because they're just kind of
Mm.
enjoying like the scene with their peers. But at the same time, the stake I was in worked pretty hard to incorporate the singles. They now have their own single stake
Oh.
in DC. But back then we were part of the regular stake, like a lot of singles wards are. There was 2 YSA wards and 1 mid singles ward, but they involved them. They called members of the singles ward to help out with like to be on the state girls camp committee to help out with scout camp. They called members of our ward to the stake high council. You had ordained high priests who were called to be on the high council as single guys because you can do that,
Yeah.
and so they did it. They worked pretty hard to involve us. I mean, the one thing you can't do in a singles ward is be the bishop, but so that makes no difference. You have a married bishop if you're in a singles ward, and you have a married bishop if you're in a family ward. So whoop de doo.
So let me ask you this question with all those DC wards.
Yeah.
Um, so say you have somebody who is divorced. So that makes
Hmm.
them single, but they have children, especially with the mid singles ward. Are they allowed to bring their children to the mid singles ward? Or is this just a mid singles ward for somebody who has no children and is single?
First, before I say anything, I open this up to our listeners, who I bet people have had those kinds of experiences. So, like,
Okay.
seriously, let us know on Facebook, folks. Tell us about your experiences with that if you've had them. From what I've seen, and I don't know, I do not know if there's a rule. It might be up to just local leader interpretation and feeling. I have seen divorcees with children attending. Well, I'm trying to think. I've seen them attend the wards. I don't know if I remember if I've seen them bring their kids or not, though, because those wards aren't going to go out of their way to like
Yeah.
have primary or something like that. They don't
Yeah,
do
well,
that.
and that was my question, especially in a mid-singles ward. If you had a number of single parents there with kids, would they offer a primary? Because I think for, that's one of the things that keeps a lot of people who end up single that have kids going to a family ward instead of a singles ward is because they want their kids to have that experience of primary.
Yeah, I think they could. I don't see there's
I don't
anything.
see why they couldn't.
I don't think there's anything that says they can't. It would just be a matter of, I mean, the issue would be when you're
Staffing.
setting up staffing. When you're setting up primary
Yeah.
in a family ward, you are assuming these people are here and their children will grow. If you are in a singles ward, you're clearly not hoping these people will be here and their children will grow through 5 years of primary or something. While they're in the mid singles
Exactly.
ward, you're hoping they'll get it together. That is an interesting thought, Tiffany. I hadn't given that much thought. I definitely remember, yeah, like some people with kids. I never went to the mid singles ward, but I remember seeing some who had kids would still show up at the singles ward. There was even, I remember there was like a single mom who actually came to a YSA ward I was in before. And the bishop was like cool with it. You know, he knew her
Yeah.
situation and stuff, but she was only in her late 20s and still wanted to be with her peers. And, you know, that's fine. She actually wound up, I think she wound up just marrying a guy in the ward, and he was
Yeah.
cool with taking on her kid and making that his family. So good for them. They never would
Well,
have met. She would have been stuck in a family ward.
this spring, our bishop gave an ultimatum to the young men and the young women who graduated because
Here
technically,
we go.
after you graduate, excuse me, from high school, sorry, I got to take a drink of water.
It's all right, Marco Rubio. Make it happen.
Well, I had the COVID. I think in my last 2 weeks ago when we podcasted, I was like, COVID or jury duty, which is going to get me first? COVID got me. And I'm still trying to get over the congestion of it. Anyway, so the edict that the bishop gave the young men and young women in our ward is he said, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to stay in this ward or you're going to go to the singles ward. You're not toggling back and forth and going, oh, I'll go here this week. I'll go there this week. You're going to make yourself part of one of the two wards. And so a good majority of them elected to go to the singles ward. My son did not. He was not interested in that. So they promptly gave him a calling in primary and he's teaching 5-year-olds.
There you go.
So
When I was
when
when I was pretty fresh off my mission, I was not into the idea of going to the singles ward. I mean, part of it was maybe just having something I knew. Like if I go back to my old
yeah,
family ward while I'm still here, going like I know this, it's fine. After a handful of months, I started to kind of feel like I was missing out on something because I remember I went one Sunday to go to the huge singles ward, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a madhouse. There's like so much going on here. But eventually, I found my way over there. So I mean, I see the arguments for it. And the last one here, for example, the last argument in this piece, it does say singles wards distract from the purpose of the church. I mean, I get okay. I mean, the purpose of the church, it says here, is to bring people to Christ. That is true. And then she says the purpose of the singles ward is to get people paired off, which is true. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's to keep a certain
yeah,
demographic more active in the church than they might otherwise be. But I also understand if we got rid of singles wards, I think we'd figure out a way to make it work. I think we'd figure out a way to accommodate the YSA. And if like I've seen some arguments. People say, "Well, yeah, but come on, YSA ward like they never call these people to leadership positions. Being in a singles ward is the only way a 25-year-old woman is going to be the Relief Society president." Okay, but that's just like culture. Like, there's no
yeah.
reason you can't have a single 25-year-old woman in a family ward and still call her as the Relief Society president. You just made that choice just not to do it and let the old guard kind of do stuff.
And I have to
That's just
say,
that's a just a choice.
to a certain extent, they'd be really smart to do that because she's
They
going to
have
have a lot
time.
more time on her hands than a
I
mom
know.
that has kids.
I know. It'd be genius. It'd be brilliant. If anything, so I'm not even arguing. I think singles words are mostly okay. I'm not into single stakes. That's a whole different topic. Um, but like you said there, I think how much could the YSAs though build up the family wards and help them grow? Because a lot of the time we are stuck in our ways, and it would be and it's like a lot of things. It's this. I'm not going like okay boomer here, but it's like think about this infusion of a different mindset and youthful mentality that's excited about church and bringing that to a family ward that can be kind of staid and sometimes going through the motions. And that could have a
True.
lot of advantages too. It could be good. So good piece. You can read it, if you knock yourselves out, folks. We'll link to it.
All right. Should we talk about the tater tot story?
Yeah,
Oh,
of
I'm so
course.
excited about the tater tot story. Um,
Take it away.
I'm equal parts excited and equal parts mystified that I have never heard of the tater tot story. And here's why. So, this tater tot story starts in the lovely, thriving metropolis of Nampa, Idaho, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
just a short jaunt from Boise. And it is the town that I grew up in. Of course, Ariane grew up there. My dad was born there and grew up there. My grandparents lived there. And I'm like, how did I not know the tater tot story? So, there is a gentleman, and his name is F. Nephi Grigg, and they
Yep.
called
That's your name.
him Neef for short. That was his nickname. So he was born
Man, he
in
must have hated his parents. I mean, anyway, sorry.
so he was born in 1913. He's the great grandson of Parley P. Pratt, and he was, of course, like most people in the early 20th century. His family lived on a farm. And so they had this small cattle and dairy farm. And it said in 1936, he married Addie Christine Crummett on a car lot on Christmas Eve. And of course, you may say, well, why did he marry her on a car lot? The dealer had promised to give a car to the first person married on his lot on Christmas Eve, and he was never one to pass up a good deal.
This man's a
So,
genius.
of course, with a name like Nephi, you know that this gentleman is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. I don't know a lot of people who aren't members naming their kids Nephi. So they ended up, he and his brothers ended up mortgaging their farms, and they had this business they wanted to buy, which was a flash freezing plant in northeastern Oregon. So they paid $500,000 for it, which is the equivalent of about 4.5 million today. And they named their company Ida because the plant sat on the border of Oregon and Idaho. Now, I of course knew that was the origin of the name Ida. And so what they started doing was they started doing frozen corn at first. And what he would see is the real money was in French fries. And so he was really frustrated with French fry production because there was a lot of potato scraps that were left over. And they would sell those potato scraps for basically nothing, for cattle feed. And so he was trying to figure out, how can I take those potato scraps and how can I make them something? So he decides to mash them together. He seasons them and he bakes them. And a creative member of the Ida marketing team came up with the all too cute name of tater tots. So now he's got these tater tots and he's like, now how am I going to market these tater tots? So where would you go to market tater tots? Well, of course, you'd go to Miami. Why would you not go to Miami to market your tater
I
tots?
mean, that's what it makes sense.
Exactly. So he takes his 15 pounds of tater tots to Miami. He convinces this chef at this swanky hotel to cook them up and serve them in small saucers as a sample to convention attendees, and they were gobbled up very, very quickly. So he knew he had a hit on his hands. So then they put them in the grocery store, but they're really inexpensive and they don't sell well because nobody trusts this new potato product that's very inexpensive. So he's like, okay, I'll up my price. So he ups the price of the tater tots and people buy the tater tots. And finally, Ida gains 25% of the frozen potato market. He ends up selling it in 1965 for $30 million, which would be about $411 million today. And then, the article goes on to talk about, how tater tots have been ingrained in the culture, especially if you, of course, watch Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon is
Of course.
a big fan of the tots, and so I just thought it was a very interesting article on the origin of the tater tot, especially following up. I can't remember if it was, I think it was last time Ariane and I podcasted, we talked about the origin of the fry sauce, which started with a member of the
Yeah.
church who
Yeah.
owned Arctic Circle in Utah. So let's give those LDS members credit for
Look at
good
the things
food.
you're giving us. Fry sauce, tater tots, dirty soda. You got just cookie
Cookies.
wars. It's just what a blessed place it is, everyone. I'm
If
so
we,
excited because I think I've heard the Boise housing market's finally starting to cool off, so I
it
can
is.
really get in on this sweet action finally. I'm very pumped. I've been chomping at the bit for years, and my wife said, "No, no, honey, it's the most inflated market in the country. We can't do
It's
it right
very.
now." So I look forward to living in Eagle.
Of,
Eagle!
of course you do. Hey, it's the swanky place, Jeff.
Eagle! That's a Scrubs reference
No,
for everybody.
our prices are falling like the temperature in December.
Heyo.
Yep.
But not like the temperature in the past week.
No,
All right.
that
I'm
was
going to do a
last
couple
summer.
a couple grab bag rando things for all y'all here. As you know, if in case you're new to this show, I live in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And one of the big things we have coming up is the rededication of the Washington, D.C. Temple. It's actually going to happen here on August 14th, less than 2 weeks away. It's funny because they dedicate it, but then we can't actually use it for 2 more weeks after that. So, okay,
They have to
whatever.
clean it.
Yeah, I guess. You would think you'd clean it before then, I guess, but okay.
They're
It
going to
gets
clean
dirty
it
from the open
twice,
house.
Jeff.
It gets dirty from the dedication. I don't know. By the way, it's funny because now that I'm in the bishopric now, and the bishops and stake presidents get to go in person and be in the
Ooh.
beautiful assembly hall on the 7th floor. But just the bishops. No invite has come the way of his wee counselors to do the same. No, it is bishops, just bishops. So it's going to be interesting because they're actually dedicated. They're extending the temple. They're making meeting houses extensions of the temple during this, and so we'll
Yes.
check recommends and lock the doors. It's cool. I've done this once before. I think it's a neat experience, but it is going to be kind of funny because basically the stake presidency and bishops won't be around, and it's like the elders quorum is just kind of running the show here, and they've asked if people are willing to do security, and I don't know if security just means checking recommends or if it means like stalking around the lot, making sure ne'er-do-wells aren't hanging around our building during. I don't know what we're supposed to be doing.
Patting down people, making sure they don't bring their guns.
We don't have that problem here, even though Virginia does have a right to carry, but it's it's not as much of a thing here. Also, it's against the rules in the church, as we all know. So anyway, I'm not going to read all of them, but LDS Living was kind enough to give us 25 noteworthy events and things tied to the Washington, D.C. temple. Yep. Some fun facts. Did you know it was originally called just the Washington Temple until 1999
Hmm.
when the church redid its naming conventions for temples? So it was the Washington Temple, and the Seattle Temple was just called the Seattle Temple, and that was it. Now, if you see temples, they're always called the Seattle Washington Temple. It's always like municipality, state, province, whatever that might be, or country, and then temple. So in the US, since we have states, or in Canada, they'll call it the Winnipeg, Manitoba Temple. I do think it's curious that in Mexico, which Mexico's official name is the United States of Mexico, but because we don't all walk around thinking about the different states of Mexico, it's funny, right? Like you build the Puebla, Mexico Temple. You're not building it by its state name. I mean, why not? It's in the state of Puebla. Why shouldn't it be the Puebla, Mexico Temple?
See, I always thought it was the Washington D.C. temple. I mean, 79, I was 12. I don't ever remember it being referred to just as the Washington temple. I always called it the Washington D.C. temple.
Well, that's what they call it. Or here's another example. Mexico, Monterrey. It should be the Monterrey Nuevo Leon Temple, but it's the Monterrey, Mexico Temple. There is an elitism there. I'm getting up on my high horse, people. There is an ethnocentrism at play there, where the temples in the North America place get the state things, but Mexico, which is also a federation just like America, doesn't get to do it. That's curious, isn't it? I think we should do this for every single statelet. Germany is a federation. All right. If a temple, I mean, what is Frankfurt in? We call it the Frankfurt, Germany temple, but Frankfurt is actually in the state of what? Hesse, right? Yeah, it's in Hesse. It should be the Frankfurt Hesse temple. I'm tired of this centric nonsense. So back to what I was talking about.
Yeah, this is just a Jeff thing. Trust me.
I'm just trying to think about what is equitable for all. Why do Canadian and American place name and United Statesian place names get this different structure? It's got to be one of the other people, okay? And I live here in the nation's capital, so call it the Washington DC America Temple. That's what we should call it. So, and by the way, the only temple that doesn't follow that structure is the Salt Lake Temple. They made an exception for it. It is not the Salt Lake, Utah Temple. It is just the Salt Lake Temple. It's the only one that still does that. So
It's
they
kind of
changed
like a
that.
Band-Aid. They don't need another name, just the Salt Lake Temple. Everybody knows where that is at.
It's too famous, I guess. So there
Yeah.
we go. I mean, which I mean, some of that makes sense. If they didn't do like Ephraim, what if they just called it the Ephraim Temple? That'd be awesome. Nobody would ever know. Well, Ephraim does sound kind of religious. Maybe that would give it away. I'm sure we could think of ones that don't work. The Taylorsville Temple, just on its own. No Utah. Anyway, as you know, the Washington D.C. temple, it's the tallest temple in the church, the highest up Moroni. It has huge exterior covered with Alabama marble, enough to cover 3.5 football fields. The temple's spires are covered in 24 karat liquid gold and fused into embossed porcelainized steel at 1680 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a reflecting pool. They had tickets. The temple drew a record over 750,000 visitors, bigger than that of the Los Angeles, California temple, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to read the whole list to you, but there's some fun little factoids here. If you're interested, it'll be over at thisweekinmormons.com, and you can learn all the good things about it. Another thing I want to mention to you here real quick, everybody, the Book of Mormon app. And be clear, the Book of Mormon app, okay? Not the Gospel Library app, the Book of Mormon app, which is a separate app that I imagine I imagine most members of the church don't bother with that app. I think it's regarded as more of an of a initial access tool, like for investigators and others. You say, yes, download this app of the Book of Mormon. That's kind of the idea. So they've updated the Book of Mormon app to make sharing, watching, and discovering easier. And I think this is kind of cool. So basically, they've added a Discover tab. They built it with members of the church and other faiths in mind. It basically provides quick links to significant sections of the Book of Mormon. So you don't have to do any guesswork. It'll tell you exactly where to go. You want to learn about Christ in the Americas, it'll take you right there to the third Nephi
Hmm.
11. Uh, there's a watch feature that'll link to the Book of Mormon videos in multiple languages. There's a share tab that gets a QR code that goes to the Book of Mormon app in the language of the user's phone. Oh, that's how you can download the app.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so
so
I
you can
think
share,
if
that's how
you
you share it with somebody else. You can say,
exactly.
"Here, get this app," and it's cool though that it links to the language on their phone, and we'll set it up in that language automatically based on your phone settings. So it's just kind of little stuff like this. I admittedly haven't used the Book of Mormon app much. I don't even know if it's on my phone in my little LDS folder or not. Probably not, because I just use Gospel Library. But kind of a cool first step. It's cool they're offering this stuff to people, making it more easy to access content and share. Sharing is caring.
I had no idea that there was this Book of Mormon app. I was like, "Oh, I did not know that."
I
Now
bet
I
the
do.
missionary. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to go to Utah's environmental nuclear bomb?
Yes.
Did you know we
Always.
had an environmental nuclear bomb in Utah?
I hear things about that. Yes.
So this was fascinating. This was a podcast that came out probably maybe a week or 10 days or so ago. It was done by The Daily. If you've ever listened to podcasts by The Daily, I rather enjoy them. It's about a 30-minute podcast. And what they did is they went out there and they talked about the Great Salt Lake. And I happened to actually listen to this podcast driving to work this morning and then driving around a little bit today, not knowing we were going to discuss it tonight. So I felt very up to speed. But basically, what they were saying is the Great Salt Lake is shrinking, and it is shrinking for a number of different reasons. First of all, obviously, climate change is one of those reasons, and with hotter temperatures and more evaporation. But really, a big reason why it is shrinking is because there's lots of water that is getting diverted to take care of all of the residential and commercial development that's going on down in Utah. So it is not going into the lake. And they are talking about all of the really bad things that can happen if this lake dries up. And some of them are already starting. And I was kind of impressed because I was like, wow, I had no idea that the environmental role that the Great Salt Lake plays. Like, for example, they were talking about in the months of October, November, December, they get lake effect snow at the ski resorts. And that lake
Hmm.
effect snow comes off the Salt Lake. And that's kind of what kickstarts the ski season for people. So you don't have that lake effect snow, you're not going to have that tourism. They also talk about how the lake is an environmental it's a feeding ground for a whole bunch of migration for birds, and that if the things like the brine shrimp go away, because as the water is evaporating, the salt content is going higher, and when you get the higher salt content, then the brine shrimp spend all their energy processing salt and not reproducing, and those brine shrimp feed lots of animals that go there. The other thing that they talked about was as the lake dries up, underneath the lake, there's all sorts of toxic chemicals, and you have the possibility for a dust storm. And the dust storm would kick up those toxic chemicals, and people would breathe them. And they just talked about, Spencer Cox has requested and said, hey, people, we need to use less water and we need to pray for rain. But just some of the other really hard, difficult political choices that need to be made in order to save the Great Salt Lake. And, I thought it was really interesting because, the church hasn't really they don't get into the environmental issues or anything like that. And what it kind of reminded me of is I shouldn't say it reminded me of this, but kind of both sides of the argument. You've got the people saying, hey, we need to take some action to protect the Great Salt Lake. And then you've got others who are like, oh, you guys are just, you're being too woke. This really isn't a problem. The Lord provided this planet for us. We're fine. We don't
It's
need to.
ours to destroy,
It's ours to
dagnabbit.
destroy. Exactly. And it kind of reminded me
Sorry,
of
it reminds.
the song from Saturday's Warrior. Zero population is what this reminded me of. And
Uh, it reminded me of there's a Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock quote. They did like an Earth Day kind of episode, and he was like, "Of course we have to save the Earth so that we can strip it of the remainder of its resources." Like that is the point.
anyway, given the very conservative political climate in Utah, and people wanting to develop their property and encouraging the growth, which everybody wants that too. How do you balance what you need to do to protect the Great Salt Lake so you don't create this place that nobody can live in, versus growth and things like that? Because I just don't ever see them putting a moratorium going on. Okay, no more building in Salt Lake. No more houses, no more commercial development. We're maxed out. We have to do this. I don't see that happening, but yet something has to be done if we're going to prevent the Great Salt Lake from drying up. So just kind of raised all sorts of interesting questions and issues, I thought.
They're kind of barreling towards catastrophe. I mean, Utah's
Yeah.
been growing at a breakneck pace, some of the fastest growing areas in the country. It's part of me thinks it's because we're like obsessed with growth. We always
Yeah.
are, right? Like
Yeah.
everything, places have to be growing, the economy has to be growing, and we're not able to just say this is fine. We're fine at a
Yeah.
moderate level of stuff. Like we don't need to be. It's I mean, it's like the rate at which you are putting up new construction is not the stock market. You don't have I mean, obviously construction companies might have shareholders to appease, but there's not like growth to be had. The
No.
value of the state, isn't going to improve. So it is a curious place to be in. I mean, I grew up, in California. Water is always an issue there for sure, and as is the pressure, even now more than ever, to build more
Conserve.
housing
Yeah.
for people. Yeah, conserve, but also build a lot more housing because people need places to live. Utah's in a different. California is overcrowded and lacks housing. Utah is tight. It's why the market's tight, but there's construction everywhere in Utah. You drive
Yeah.
along I-15, especially in the western Salt Lake Valley, ton of it there. There's a ton of stuff going on over there. Um, it's hard. The demand is there. They want to build things, but at some point you got to say, yeah, we don't got the resources for this anymore, and that's not just going to magically fix itself.
No.
It was an interesting podcast. Yeah, I heard it too. It was pretty illuminating. They didn't mention it much in the podcast, but I read something recently about how Las Vegas actually does a very good job managing water, despite
Really?
also having a scarcity issue. Yeah, and so you can compare Vegas to Utah, and it's like night and day. Where the Vegas area goes to great lengths to regulate water use, but Utah is very laissez-faire about everything. And like here we are,
Yeah.
you could regulate stuff, folks. Don't let people have lawns. Use
Yeah.
environmentally appropriate landscaping. Sometimes regulation has to happen. I'm not one for it in all cases, but sometimes you need to regulate. Just like
Exactly.
Nate Dogg and Warren G said, you got to regulate. All right, how are we doing here? We're 45 odd minutes in. What kind of rando? Well, it's one thing I really want to talk about here is the fact that we have a new General Relief Society and primary presidency, right?
We do.
This was discussed, of course, back in the April General Conference, which was interesting at the time because I can't remember another time when they said, we are releasing so and so, but not until August. And we all wonder,
Yeah.
like, what's happening until between now and August that, like, they don't want to change regimes. Nothing happened, but for whatever reason, this is how we did it, and that's fine. So, as of just this week, Sister President Jean B. Bingham is no longer the Relief Society General President. She was wonderful and incredible. Also, of course, her counselors we all love dearly, where we had Sister Sharon Eubank and Reina Alberto, who both were just absolute rock stars. And I've loved the past 5 years of this presidency immensely. I have just thought they have just been terrific across the board, to say nothing of even the other leaders we've had. Joy D. Jones, what she was doing in primary before, she was just outstanding. And then I think it's interesting because the new Relief Society president is Sister Camille Johnson, who came in a year ago to replace Sister Jones. And then somebody, I don't know, in Salt Lake was like, all right, hold on. We need her. Not that primary is not important, but like we need her for the big show. We need
Exactly.
her for the relief society. Like she's far more capable than it even lets on. So we're going to switch her over, and now she is the General Relief Society president,
Maybe like
but did not keep her.
primary was just like the JV team. She was on the JV team for a year while she got her
Yeah,
feet wet, and then they moved her up to varsity.
yeah. And I think the only change they made in the primary presidency was that was a shuffle up, right? Because I believe first, right? Because wasn't Susan H. Porter the first counselor previously, and
I
she became
believe
the
so.
president now? And I think Amy A. Wright was the second counselor, and now Tracy Y. Browning is a new second counselor.
Yes.
Um, which is great, and she's a woman of color as well, and I think that's always terrific to get those voices and those people with those
And
experiences,
a
positions in the
convert
church.
to the church. I mean, not that
Hmm.
we haven't had converts to the church, but she had just a real, unusual, atypical LDS upbringing, and I liked that. In fact, when I was reading the biography on all of these women, because sometimes when we think of the women that are in the General Relief Society presidency, the Young Women's presidency, and the General Primary presidency, we tend to think, oh, they're all Utah stay-at-home moms who never worked in the real world or did anything other than raise children. And the majority of these women are highly educated. They've had careers. They've had all sorts of varied life experiences. One of them, I think it was, can't remember which one of them had cancer and survived cancer, which I thought, wow, that's it was Amy
That,
Wright.
that, that was Amy Wright, who had stage
Yes,
4 ovarian cancer.
stage 4
Yeah.
ovarian cancer. That is nothing to that's big if you survive stage 4 ovarian cancer.
Mhm.
So she's had some incredible experiences. And then you've got sister, I want to make sure I get her name right. Sister Yi, who was a Disney
Yes.
a- did aminate I cannot speak tonight.
She worked in animation,
She worked in animation for Disney, and then she
and she
subsequently
oversees
went
the
to the
church,
church.
and
Yeah,
she oversees the church's animation team. So all those
exactly.
cool animations you see in videos, like especially for primary kids or anything
Yeah,
else, she's been involved in that. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
very interesting background.
And then, of course, Camille Johnson, not only did she get a law degree, but she was a practicing lawyer for 30
She was a
years,
she was a trial lawyer,
a
right?
trial lawyer at a very big law firm. And so I think I enjoy the fact, and not that to say that I mean, I firmly believe all of these women are called, and this is what the Lord wants them to do. But I just appreciate the fact that we're getting a lot of varied backgrounds of these women with varied life experiences that they can then bring to their colleagues.
Hmm. Amen to that. I'm excited to see what they do. I mean, I've already enjoyed Sister Johnson and the time that she was in the
Yeah,
primary. I think she'll do some terrific stuff, and we're going to get to know these great sisters. And I think it's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking more at the background of when did Sister Browning actually join the church? That's what I was trying to see.
I
I
think
think she
she was
was.
a teenager.
It seems like she was a teenager. Yeah, she was like Presbyterian before that. It's very cool stuff, and I love to see that as well. I will miss Sister. I will miss Sister Eubank probably more than anybody. I think Sharon Eubank is one of my favorite leaders of quite some time. She has just been terrific. I'm sure
Yeah,
she'll still keep being involved in many excellent capacities, but I will miss her quite a bit.
we'll
Hey,
see
can I throw
her
a quick?
at Timeout for Women.
Oh, I have not thought about that since I worked at Deseret Book. I remember Time Out for Women. I remember I went to one that they had like in Pasadena or something like that, and so we staffed it to sell, to sell product for Deseret Book and stuff like that. And I'm there just doing my thing and whatever. And this is funny because I'm sure you know Julie Hanks,
Oh
right?
yes.
Okay, before she was Julie Hanks, therapist, she was Julie De Azevedo, singer, and pursuing something of a career on the Mormon, female singing circuit. And she had an album out. So she was there at Time Out for Women. And I remember she was one of the few people like was there and wandered into the merch area we were hanging out. And she just kind of walked in. I hate telling the stories. I think Julie Hanks is awesome, but she had a great sense of self, we shall say, and was just like,
Okay.
I'm Julie De Azevedo. And we were kind of like, and my buddy just goes like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you." And just like didn't care at all. Just knocked her down a peg or two. But I'll always remember that because it was very much like we were supposed to go like, it's
Yay.
her, it's her. Whatever. People evolve. Obviously, she's gone on to do incredible things in the therapy space with a whole different career. And I think nothing ill of her by any means. I mean, heck, I walk into places all the time and say I'm Jeff Openshaw,
And they
and nobody
go,
cares.
okay.
And nobody cares. It's very sad. Real quick fun mention here. Last week, Elder Dale G. Renlund of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles was able to throw the opening pitch at at a Baltimore Orioles game over there in Camden Yard. As
Yes.
you know, every summer we have some kind of Latter-day Saint night, formerly Mormon night at baseball games. It's a big thing. And sometimes the person who throws the opening pitch can be of varying renown. But they had Elder Renlund do it this time. And this was not a random assignment, though. It was cool. Elder Renlund did his residency and a fellowship at Johns Hopkins. He was a physician professionally. So this was like a big deal. He spent a significant portion of his professional life living in Baltimore and being a fan there. And he spoke about how like impactful it was for him. So I think it's very cool. They got to bring him over there and throw out that pitch. Good job, Elder Renlund.
They had a shirt for him with his name on it.
Yeah. Also, I like that they let them wear jerseys and stuff. I like in this one because he's sporting just like an orange
Yeah,
like t-shirt underneath, and then the jersey. Because so often they do this with apostles, and they're still wearing their shirt and tie, and they just put the jersey on over it. So, as if I didn't love Elder Renlund enough, thank you for just dressing appropriately for the occasion.
exactly.
I appreciate him doing that and people being cool with him doing that. Thank you very
Exactly.
much. Yes.
All right, where you want to go next?
Wherever you want. We don't have to cover everything on the list, Whatever you're
Okay.
feeling, however you're feeling, Tiffany.
Let's hit the Christian national is incompatible with Mormonism.
Oh, sure. That's a topic for the dinner table.
It is a topic for the dinner table. So, as many people may or may not be aware, there are certain members of the Republican Party who are saying we should be Christian nationalists. Republicans should be Christian nationalists, and
Well, they don't go out and say, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yes. They're
espousing
not saying we should be. Continue.
yes, and
I'm
anyway,
mansplaining. I
espousing
apologize.
that all laws and things like that should fall in line with Christian principles. And
Yes.
um and so it's when I first heard this, kind of my first thought was, and it was kind of interesting because this article in By Common Consent touches on this, that a lot of those Christian evangelical groups that claim this Christian nationalism think that Mormonism is a cult. And so, when I hear members who are like, oh, yes, Christian nationalism, that's great. I'm like, do you realize they don't consider you to be Christian? And so you're not part of their little gang, that Mormonism is a cult to them. And anyway, and so the article kind of goes through and talks about things that Joseph Smith had said in the early part of the church about, he said, I'm bold to declare before heaven that I'm just as ready to die defending the rights of a Presbyterian, a Baptist, or a good man of any other denomination. And just how often the church has said, hey, religious freedom means religious freedom for all religions, not just Christian religions, but, Muslims, Buddhists, any sort of religion. We believe in religious freedom for anybody to be able to worship how and where and the way that they want to worship. And so this Christian nationalism is really, I think, incompatible with our beliefs, and that's what struck me when I first read it. But I did not really go down the rabbit hole of the comments, and probably the comments on By Common Consent wouldn't be that bad. But if this were to hit, Deseret News or Salt Lake Tribune, for sure you'd have a lot of members of the church who are like, yes, Christian nationalism, that's a good thing. We should be doing that.
Yeah.
Just
And I don't
based
even know if
on
they're
what
thinking,
I've seen.
and I don't even know if they're thinking of it in those terms, but
Yeah.
there's absolutely a belief that yes, it is our duty to impose Christian ideology on the states. And to be clear, there's a very clear distinction right here. I mean, it's not and Sam Brunson makes a point. He says there's a difference between my values influence my policy preferences
Yes.
and the laws of the country should codify my version of Christianity. And we're talking about the latter, and that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going down, and that is antithetical to religious freedom, big time. That's just
Yep.
not what it's about. That's a good piece. One fun thing here: the church has let us know now that you can find the church on Spotify and other music streaming services. Search for the Church of Jesus Christ for, I never thought I'd read this line, for uplifting Christian pop and instrumental music. I didn't think we'd even embraced the Christian pop label for anything because it's not reverent enough, but here we are. And I'm fully aware of the type of music that they put out nowadays. I'm fully aware of the EFY music they put out 20 years ago. That I remember even when I was on my mission and someone asked if EFY music was okay, and our mission president actually had an opinion. He was like, "Well, if you understand the lyrics, that's fine. But if it's in English and you're like living with, a native Spanish speaker and they don't even know what they're saying, he's like, then it's just nothing but like pop music for them. So think about whether that's appropriate. Like if you understand the lyrics, sure. If you don't, well then whatever. If that's the case, then I don't know what I've been doing with Sigur Rós for all these years, people, because I don't know a word they're saying, and I haven't for 20 years. But it still uplifts me. So there's you can find new artists, quote unquote, on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora. No word if you can listen lossless on Tidal, unfortunately, but
Hmm.
hey, maybe we'll get there someday. But you can look for the artist Church of Jesus Christ. You can look for the artist
Hmm.
Strive to Be, which has youth music. And of course, you can find the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square as an artist, quote unquote, to get all of this music in one place. It's a curious way to do it. It's fine. You could also just have the church curating like playlists instead, but whatever. It's great. It's fine. The one thing I wouldn't mind seeing, though, even on something like Spotify, I would love it if the scriptures or general conference were brought to these
Oh,
streaming services because it's nice to listen to them. And I'm going out on a limb here, and maybe I'm really dumb. Okay. And I know longtime listeners have no problem going along with that. But if you want to listen to conference talks on your drive, your commute, whatever else, right? You're opening up the Gospel Library app, you're finding the talk, you click the little headphone button, you're connected to your Bluetooth, and then you stream it, and it's fine. But once that talk's over, it might move on to the next one. But either way, you're dealing with what is a perfectly good interface in the Gospel Library app, but not one that is like
yeah.
multimedia first, not audio streaming first. And so I find for things like that, especially something like conference where you might want to work your way through it, or even like the Saints series, the books.
Yeah.
I listened to an entire Saints book, but I did it via the Gospel Library app, and it was actually kind of tedious because I had to like remember where I was, go back and find a chapter and stream it again. I mean, I could save where I was in the app on chapter. I would really love to have those sorts of things as artists on music streaming apps. That would
Yeah.
be incredibly impactful. I would be probably more likely to work my way through conference talks or through Saints or something else if they were on there in that level of organization. How easy would that be if there was a Spotify account called General Latter-day Saint General Conference, whatever, and one album was
Sunday morning session.
April was April, or one album was April 2022, and then within that, the equivalent of disc one would be Sunday morning, disc two could be Sunday afternoon, that kind of whatever, however you want to do it. That'd be really really cool. I don't know. I'm sure they've considered it. That's my ask. The music side of it's great, but I would love a more effective and efficient way to stream audio content that is found in the library app. That is my request.
I
This is my
completely
demand.
I completely agree with you.
Well, thank you.
Well, should I conclude us out with my favorite segment, which is Mormons behaving badly?
Absolutely and forever. Yes.
Okay. I am going to give an update on my favorite little Idaho sheriff, Craig Rowland. You may recall he is the Bingham County Sheriff, and this is the gentleman where the young women put a thankful turkey on his door last November, and he was a little less than thankful for his turkey. So he ended up with some felony charges for failing to be thankful for his turkey.
Uh-oh.
And he also justified his behavior by making some rather salacious comments about the Native Americans that live in his county. So, needless to say, he was actually set for trial last week. His felony charges were supposed to go to trial last week. He ended up firing his lawyer, which I thought was probably a good call. Apparently, he and his lawyer were having a failure to communicate, so he fired that lawyer and he got a new lawyer. And his new lawyer um, of course, said, I'm going to need some time to get up to speed. So his trial was pushed back to October. But the key thing that happened, and I don't know if this was at the bequest of his new lawyer or what was going on, he finally submitted his resignation. There was a big call for him to resign after this incident. He refused to resign. And just last week, he submitted his resignation and said, I've become too much of a distraction for Bingham County. And I want to go, you think? And effective August 1st, he resigned. So he is no longer the sheriff of Bingham County.
Oh, it's
So
over.
it's over as far as the sheriff goes. I, of course, will be following his trial in October, and I will keep you all updated as to whether or not A, he comes to his senses and enters into a plea agreement, or B, he goes to trial and we'll see if he gets convicted of the charges if he goes to trial. I
You should
I
be his lawyer.
I also have
He'll be his
another
lawyer.
theory. Here's my
Okay.
other theory about why there is a delay in his trial. The Attorney General's office in the state of Idaho was the one that was prosecuting him because of obviously conflicts of interest with the local county prosecuting him. And he has always maintained that the current elected Attorney General has a vendetta against him
Uh-oh.
based on some outrageous statements that he made to the legislature that rape kits shouldn't be tested because the majority of women make these things up. And
Oh.
so that particular
Oh.
attorney general lost in the primary. So we will have a new attorney general come January, whether that is a Republican or Democrat. Given Idaho's political climate, it's probably more than
Oh.
likely to be a Republican.
It's
And
gonna be Ammon Bundy. It's gonna be Ammon Bundy.
no, Ammon Bundy's the governor. He's running for governor.
But he's gonna pivot. He's
He's
gonna
gonna
pivot.
well, he's gonna have a bit of a problem because he's not a licensed lawyer, and it's kind of the law in Idaho. If you want to be an attorney general, you have to be a licensed lawyer.
Nah, yeah, they don't care about
But
laws.
Ammon Bundy doesn't care about laws, so you're probably right about that.
There's no way to own the libs and not to care about the rules to get elected in the first place. Come on.
There you go. So I kind of wonder if he's trying to push his trial back until post election to see if the new attorney general will cut him a better
Yeah.
deal or dismiss his
Yeah.
charges. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in October if he goes to trial or if it gets continued again.
Well, okay. That's
So
fun. Um, I'll add one last one here that I don't know if it's we don't know if they are Mormons behaving badly, but in St. George there was a crime spree across 14 LDS meeting houses. Three people, including a juvenile, have been arrested over allegedly breaking windows and vandalizing all for a spree across the St. George, Utah area over multiple days. And they have, arrested them. A couple of them are cooperating and have essentially copped to what they have done. One of whom is an adult, sure. And there's going to be a secondary felony charge of criminal mischief. It's one of my favorite charges, by the way. You're getting charged with mischief. But I know it's a very real thing. I'm not trying to make light of it, folks. But that's going down. Just 14 is pretty staggering. Like, that takes time to spend your
yeah.
days. Like, all right, let's go trash this building. Let's go get this building. Let's go get this building. Let's just work our way across Washington County until we hit Laverkin and then call it a day.
Well, and
And that'll
especially
be that.
considering it's July. It's hot there. Why do you even want to leave your house, let alone plan to destroy buildings?
Why do you want to live in St. George? These are questions I don't have answers to. No one
Exactly.
knows.
But the best part is the adult that is arrested, he's in the Purgatory Correctional Facility. There are a number of reasons why you could call
Oh my
that
God.
correctional facility purgatory because A, it's a correctional facility, and B, where it's located.
Tiffany, before we go, it's not your the official week. Any favorite things? Anything you're plugging right now, or are you going to save it for your next show, next go around?
I'm trying to think if I have
Other
a
than
favorite thing right now.
mocha carpet or whatever it's called,
Yeah, my milk
Italianate.
chocolate carpet, colored carpet. Um, yeah, I just, you know what? I will plug a podcast that I listened to that I was going to plug a couple weeks ago on when we recorded, but I didn't. It is in the LDS Living All In podcast. They did an
Oh yeah,
interview
yeah, sure.
with Alyssa Parker. And for those of you who may not remember who Alyssa Parker is, her daughter Emily was killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. And they did this interview with Alyssa right after the Uvalde school shooting. And she, of course, had some thoughts on Uvalde, but mostly she was talking about her experience with Emily, and what that day was like, and just the spiritual gifts that she was given. And it was such an outstanding podcast. I mean, I'm sitting there crying as I'm listening to it because you can just feel her emotion and imagine what, she was going through as a parent. But at the same time, it was a very uplifting podcast as well, because she really talks about the blessings and the comfort and the things that the Lord gave her. So
Wow.
I would encourage anybody to go listen to that, because it was well worth it.
That's awesome. Cool. Thanks for the plug. All In has come out of nowhere and become a very powerful force in the LDS podcast realm. We, on the other hand, don't have those resources. So please, folks, if you want to support us on Patreon, please do so. We appreciate you chipping in. It's very nice of you to do so. And obviously, visit us at thisweekinmormons.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week with more news. Tiffany will be back Tiffany will be back in a couple of weeks with Ariane for a sisters-focused episode.
Of course.
So until then, Tiffany, thanks for being here. Great to see you.
You're welcome. Enjoyed
Appreciate
it.
it. And thanks all you for listening, and we hope you have a great week. This Week in Mormons is over. Goodbye.